Hi, scholars. We're moving on to section 3. We're going to use the midpoint and the distance formulas for this section. How can you find the midpoint and length of a line segment in a coordinate plane? Again, we're not going to do the exploration simply because it's meant to be done in partners. So I'm going to keep this to notes, vocabulary, and practice. But I do expect you to have your journal open. This is page 12. And again, the exploration is on page 13. Just as a review, you are expected to remember the Pythagorean theorem. It's a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where c is always the hypotenuse. If you have a triangle, a and b are the legs. So remember, the definition of hypotenuse is always across from the right angle. Here's your hypotenuse. That's all we see. And it doesn't matter which side you label as A or B, as long as it's a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So in this case, A is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 units. B is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units. And so it would be 8 squared plus 6 squared equals c squared. So this is from algebra. 64 plus 36 equals c squared. 100 equals c squared, which means if we want to undo a square root, we don't want 100. We want to know what the square root of 100 is. So if you remember what number times itself equals 100, it's 10. And this is centimeter graph paper. So C is 10. Now, what we're going to talk about is on page 14. Okay. It is almost self-explanatory. The word midpoint, you should think of as middle. The midpoint is the point that divides a segment. And remember, there are flashcards on Quizlet that I already loaded in on Teams for you. So you can do it that way too, but I expect you to write this down. Into two congruent segments. So midpoint, think middle. Now, only slightly different is a segment bisector, because a segment bisector is a little more involved. It's a point, ray, line segment, or a plane that intersects the segment at its midpoint. Slightly different. Okay, so here we go on our core concepts. The midpoint of a segment is the point that divides the segment into two congruent segments. So if M is the midpoint, then AM is congruent to MB. And we can write that AM segment is congruent to MB segment. Remember, that's the shape. But if we write AM equals MB, these are numbers. Okay, there's no symbol up there, and these are size. These are shapes, these are size. Congruent means shape, equals means size. So this is where you will always have numbers. Okay. A segment bisector can be any of these that intersect. It does bisect a segment. So in this case, CD or line CD, see the little arrows, is a segment bisector of AB, which is a segment. So AM is congruent to MB, just like up here, and AM is equal to MB in length. We use these little hash marks to make that visually apparent. So if we take those two segments, we're going to go on to the midpoint formula because we don't have to count every time. We can just use our little formula with your x-axis and your y-axis. This is an algebra review concept. The coordinates are basically, if you add up the endpoints and divide by 2, you're finding the middle, which is the midpoint. So if A has a coordinate of x sub 1, y sub 1, and if B has a coordinate of x sub 2, y sub 2, then you can add the x's together and divide by 2. You can add the y's together and divide by 2. And that will give you your midpoint x1, x2. So this is the midpoint formula. These numbers divided by 2, comma, these numbers divided by 2. Write down any notes you need to write. Of course, I show you an example. Okay. The distance formula, also a review from algebra, but we're going to use those same coordinates. A has x sub 1, y sub 1. B has x sub 2, y sub 2. And instead, we're going to basically apply the Pythagorean theorem here. So this side right here is like A. This side's like B. This side's like C. And if you actually went through and remembered what we just did on those other examples, we subtracted the difference in the y direction, so you get x2 minus x1. We subtracted the difference in the y direction, so we get y2 minus y1 for b. And then this is the hypotenuse, which was a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So AB, which is right here, is like your c squared. We square rooted both sides to get this distance formula. So you'll just be plugging in numbers, and here's how we're going to do it with practice. Turn your page to 16, and we'll get to all of those. So I'm going to go through this quickly. Identify the segment bisector of AB, then find AB. So the segment bisector is M. We'll just say M. And then AB is twice as much as that. So AB equals 26 because 13 is half. Now, this bisector of AB is a ray. So it's going to be ray MC, a dot on this end and an arrow on that end. If I know that AM is 8, then I know AB is equal to 16. And this one is line L, so my segment bisector is line L. I know that if MB is 26, AB is twice as much. So 26 times 2 is 52. Next, if I want to know the segment bisector of EF, same thing, but to find EF, you'll notice we have some equations here. So I'm going to have to write a little bit. I'm going to zoom in. Okay. So the bisector is MT. The arrow goes over the T. Now, if these are equal, then I can write an equation. Now I want to get my x's together, so I'm going to take away 2x from both sides. So I have 4x equals 4. I want to undo the multiplication by 4. So I divide by 4 and I get x equals 1. Now we're not quite done because it said find EF. So if you get that x is 1 and you plug it in here, then 6 times 1 is 6, and twice that is 12. So EF equals 12 is your final answer, which means you have to put a box around it. Okay? Now, this bisector is line M. So I'll just do that. I can write that this is equal to this. So x plus 15 equals 7x minus 3. I'm going to take away 1x from both sides to get 6x here. And I'm going to add 3 to both sides to get 18 over here. X is multiplied by 6, so I'm going to undo that multiplication. I get x equals 3. Again, I found the variable, but I didn't answer the question. So if x is 3, I can plug it into here and get 18. And then twice 18 is going to give me EF equals 36. Watch it again if I went too fast. Here, point M is the segment bisector. And now I can write my equation. 3x minus 4 equals 5x minus 12. I'm going to take away 3x from both sides. And now to get my x alone, I'm going to add 12 to both sides. So 12 minus 4 is 8. Now I want to undo the multiplication by 2. And so I get x equals 4. Again, I'm going to take the 4. I'm going to plug it in. Now, it doesn't matter which one I plug it into, but these numbers look smaller, so I always try to make things easier for myself. 3 times 4 is 12. 12 minus 4 is 8. And so if EM is 8, then EF is 16. Again, even though you got the variable, you still have to go and answer the question. So these three we're going to do are midpoints. Okay, we're going to find the midpoint. That means we're going to add the x's together and divide by 2. We're going to add the y's together and divide by 2. So if P is this and this, then I'm just going to label them so that I remember which one is which. These are my first points. And these are my second points. So the midpoint formula says that if I add the x's together and divide by 2, I will get the x. And then if I add the y's together and divide by 2, I will get the y. So then this is negative 4 divided by 2, that's negative 2, comma, this is 8 divided by 2, that's 4. That's my final answer. And I put a box around it. There's my first point, and there's my second point. So again, the x's added together divided by 2 will give me the middle, and the y's added together will give me the middle. So negative 2 plus 10 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 7 plus negative 3 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Final answer, put a box. Okay. X sub 1 plus x sub 2 divided by 2 gives me the middle. Y sub 1 plus y sub 2 divided by 2. This is 12 divided by 2, which is 6. And this is negative 18 divided by 2, which is negative 9. And so, again, I box my final answer. Look, we're almost done. Finally, now we're going to be given the midpoint M and one endpoint of JK. We want to find the coordinates of the other endpoint. So this is only going to be slightly tricky. We're going to be using the distance formula. And so let's set it up here by drawing a picture. Okay, here's J. Should have drawn here's M, and here's K. All right. Okay, now if we want to, we're not going to use the distance formula because there's an easier way, so I misspoke. Since we're given the midpoint, what we can do is write little equations to solve this just using the midpoint formula. So it's just like these up here. It's going to be slightly different. But what I do is to find the x, okay, this is the midpoint. So I can say that 1 is equal to 7 plus x sub 2 divided by 2. That's what this is going to equal. It's sort of going backwards from here. And the other one is the y. So negative 2 is equal to the first y plus the second y divided by 2 as well. And so I can just write these little equations to solve for it. This is division by 2, so you're going to get rid of that first. You're going to multiply both sides by 2. You get 2 equals 7 plus x2. I subtract 7 from both sides, and I get negative 5 equals x sub 2. Here, same thing, multiply both sides by 2. Negative 4 equals 2 plus y sub 2. I want to subtract 2 to get rid of that. So negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6. And so the coordinates of the other endpoint are going to be negative 5 for the x, negative 6 for the y. Number 11. I've written a little big because I wanted to show you that example. But you're going to write the same type of thing. You would write this, here's your same picture, but you're going to write the midpoint x is equal to 5 plus x sub 2 over 2. And you're going to write the other y, negative 1, equals negative 2 plus y sub 2 over 2. So the middle of these points is negative 1. The middle of these points is 0. You multiply both sides by 2, you get 0. Equals 5 plus x sub 2. So x sub 2 has to equal negative 5. Both sides here gives you negative 2 equals negative 2 plus y sub 2. You're going to add 2 to both sides to make that go away. And so that gives you 0 equals y sub 2. And your midpoint on your other endpoint is negative 5 comma 0. And do try to keep your work separate, especially if you're not a super neat writer. I do like to be able to see it clearly. Okay, last problem. This is the midpoint, so the x midpoint is equal to 2 plus x sub 2 over 2. And the y midpoint is equal to 16 plus y sub 2 over 2. Multiply both sides times 2. You get negative 9 equals 2 plus x sub 2. Take away 2 from both sides to get negative 11 equals x sub 2. Multiply both sides here by 2. 14 equals 16 plus y sub 2. Subtract 16 from both sides to make that go away. You get negative 2 equals y sub 2. And your final coordinate is negative 11, negative 2. Whew, we didn't do any distance problem practice, but we will probably do more of that tomorrow. And you will be having a quiz on 1.1 through 1.3. So we'll definitely be doing more practice. All right, see you soon.